Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Today's one, is going to be quite a special one for me personally, similar to the one I did before where I spoke about me and my partner, and more importantly how marriage is important for me. And as you can tell from the title of this video, we sort of naturally, I felt like it would be a natural thing to carry on to the sort of this topic, which is all about belief and faith. Now this is obviously quite a controversial area of conversation. I know it can trigger people very harsh. I've had certain interactions where I said, I've seen certain people struggle, and I was like, why don't you fancy coming to church on Sunday? And they just exploded and had go at me, and I just thought, it's a healthy place to be spiritually and mentally. It's a very uplifting place, even if you don't believe. And I was really taken back by it. And, I felt like I wanted to make this video because I have seen a few comments on my video and also in other videos on YouTube where I searched up when people talk about, sort of faith in the military and sort of just faith in general. And I was hoping to talk about my own experiences, sort of things that I have gone through in order for me to believe, how I basically spent 21, 22 years of my life an atheist, a very strong one at that, and how faith literally saved my life at one point, literally. And I'm hoping to cover all that in this video, but I just want to state quickly that at no point in this video I'm going to try and convert anyone to faith. I just want to talk about my own sort of experiences, and hopefully, regardless of what angle you're looking at this from, whether you're skeptical or you're not too sure you are religious, the only thing I ask is just to listen with an open mind and, take anything you can away from this video, as I do with all videos, to try and make it as informative as possible. So without further ado, let's crack straight on. So I think the best way to actually start this is to talk about my sort of upbringing. As you could really understand, and I'm sure yourself could sort of vouch for this, is that your sort of how you act when you're older is somewhat relevant to how you were when you grew up. It usually goes two ways, whether it's a way of, you stick to what the sort of you was taught, how you was brought up, or you go the opposite way and you do the complete opposite. It's usually quite strong between the two. Maybe there's a little bit of sort of noise, if you will, in between. But generally it usually goes one way or another. It's quite black and white. And that's what happened to me. My upbringing was very atheistic, if that's the right word. My parents are not married. They were always, or they came across always against religion. Don't get married, religion causes wars, blah, 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 blah. And I assume that stemmed on from their parents, and maybe at some point something changed in order to cause that sort of chemical and chain reaction. So, naturally being, and at any point in this video, if I say, I was an atheist because I was a moron, that's not calling atheist moron, that's calling myself moron, okay? Anything that's, I'm saying offensively is because I'm looking at myself, okay? Please don't take this out of context and think that I'm calling you a moron if you are in that group. I'm not saying that, I'm directing it at me because, it did cause me to go in a really bad place. So I just want to quickly state that. So anyway, back on track. So, naturally being a stupid kid and sort of not really finding my own way in life, I sort of, took that and took it into my young adulthood until I decided to make a very sort of drastic change, if you will. So, throughout my entire hood, I was always atheist. I always mocked people of faith, regardless of what area you was in, whether you was, Christian, Islamic, Hindu, Buddhist, whatever. If I could take the piss, I will. And, to some extent, I might still do, but it's not meaningful, if that makes sense. It's not fueled by hatred, if that makes sense. And that's the sort of, you always say when people are joking, there's always like a meaning behind it. And for me, there was, I had a deep dislike for it. I had a deep hatred, and there was no reason why. Like, these people have not done anything to me. Like, I don't know why. And that sort of took me all the way up until sort of June, July 2021. So at this point, I was probably 21 or 22. Okay. And I had a real sort of surreal moment. Oh, sorry, something just came up on the phone. I had a real surreal moment, I don't know if I can use those words, but I'm using them. Well, I was basically in a relationship for 3 years. I won't talk about this too much, but to sort of condense it down, it was a very toxic relationship. I relied basically too much on this person, spiritually, mentally, to live, to breathe. Literally everything about my existence was to that person. And obviously, as you can see, it's probably very unhealthy. And now looking back here, when I've done a bit of review, and I'll talk about this in a minute, sort of how when I did it, I noticed it came from a lack of self-love, and that was actually stemmed from my sort of anti-religious belief. And it might seem a bit strange, but it was true. I still can't really put it into context as to why that was the case, but it just was. And through that, I was actually quite arrogant, ironically. I was also quite nasty at times, and I was quite horrible, to be brutally honest. And and basically what happened was that this person just dropped off the map, not dead obviously, but sort of disappeared, just blocked me on everything, just gone. And as you can sort of imagine, I felt like I was up here, and I just freaking plummeted to the floor, and I was going through a really bad way. And you know, but the funny thing was, it was quite a similar breakup to all my other ones, even though this was the longest period of relationship I've been in at the time. You know, it was similar to, in the sense of, you know, I was just a normal breakup. I feel a bit shit, feel a little bit depressed, not really enjoying much. You know, I wouldn't want to say depression, but it was a little bit of a down feeling, if you will. Normal, it was quite normal, but nothing really different from all my other relationships, which all stem from I don't know why I'm really with this person. I'm not really with this person for the long term and all this other stuff. I don't really know why. And again, I covered that in my previous video about relationships specifically, so I won't talk about it too much. So I really sat there for a moment. I said, you know, I've got to a point now of an age where I'm young adult now. I'm 21, 22, and I thought I really want to change sort of how I am. And I want to just talk about those 3 years. I'm talking about everything from the when I can remember to this present day. I want to change. However, I was at a dilemma. I was sitting there going, okay, I would like to change. I'm not too sure what I wanted to change yet. I just didn't want to be this person anymore. But the problem is that my brain and soul, everything, whatever you want to call it, was hardwired to go in this direction, to be arrogant, to not know any different. You know, I wanted to completely switch it to this way. How on earth am I going to do that? I don't know what to do. And, you know, strangely enough, in the past couple of days, I started feeling this really odd feeling. I couldn't really explain it. So I sort of just sat on the end of my bed, and this was when I was living at my parents' house. And, you know, I sat there and went, I don't know what I need to do. And I said this out loud and also in my head. And bearing in mind, before I just carry on, when I said I wanted to change, it weren't like, oh, do you know, I feel like I should change. But it weren't like that weak reasoning. It was really deep. It was like I hated how I was. I hated the person I was. I hated failing all the time and feeling shit and getting into debt and just ruining my entire life. So there was a real moment of reality sort of hitting my chest when I thought, okay, this needs to change. You know, this something needs to happen. So, you know, anyway, I was sitting on the edge of my bed, and I sort of just said out loud, like in the air, I was like, I don't know what I need to do. Again, bearing in mind, this time I had no belief whatsoever. Still sort of an atheist, but there was slight sort of maybe edging towards sort of religion, if you will, but it was really far off from that point. So I sort of said out loud, you know, I don't know what I need to do. I keep going down this road. It's what I've been sort of set on this path for some reason. I want to go this one. I don't know what it means. I don't know where it's going to lead me. I don't know what person I'm going to become. But I just don't want to be this person. Like, this could be worse, but I feel like I need to take that sort of road of sort of unknown, of dark and all that other stuff, because I know this road that's all lit is not a good path for me. I need to change. And I sort of said it out loud, and strangely enough, I think if people who are religious maybe be able to understand this, but you know, I try and explain this to people who maybe haven't experienced this, or you know, who don't believe. But it was almost like I didn't just open my mind; it's sort of like I opened my soul. It's really strange. I opened up from my chest, and I kid you not, when I said that, about maybe 30 minutes later, you know, at this point it started going really like down, and I just started feeling really guilty. It was really strange. Like, it started probably about maybe a minute afterwards, but it was really slow. And then when it got to about half an hour, and at this point, you know, I was just sort of doing my daily routine, I just felt really, really guilty. I felt really crap. And then sort of the next day after, and I felt worse and worse and worse as the day got on. The next day I was in a seriously bad way. But it weren't in like a sort of depressed way. It was almost like, okay, this is happening. Like what you said, it's almost like God was sitting there saying, like, you've said this, I'm putting your balls against the wall now, you're doing it. So I sort of thought, okay, obviously this is a really weird coincidence, but I'm going to see what happens. I'm not going to intervene. I'm not going to try and direct it differently. I'm just going to literally let them take me somewhere. And I kid you not, you know, I've always been massively into games, you know, board games, sort of computer games when I was a kid. So I was sort of playing my sort of standard games because I weren't employed at this time. I was briefly unemployed. And, you know, I was really trying to feel better. And I just, no matter what I did for this entire 7 days, I just couldn't find anything I enjoyed, from food to games to, you know, sort of family and things like that. It was just nothing. And, you know, it got worse and worse as time got on. But throughout the days, you know, I remember on like the sort of second and third day, but this sort of happened on the first. So this was like a Monday, and I sort of said it on a Sunday, if that makes sense. So it was sort of like sort of Sunday, Monday-ish sort of times when I said it. I started getting like images and sort of clips in my head starting to come back of my previous relationship. And the one that stuck with me the most, there was many, many different ones, but the one that stuck with me the most is that we was basically in a car and we was arguing, you know, heavily, and she was nag, going at me, and I just couldn't take him on. I just lost it. I just lost the plot. You know, it's just obviously not physical, but, you know, I started shouting and this, that, and the other while I was driving. And this really strangely, this sort of memory came back to me, and it was completely changed. And I realised now, then at that point, that she wasn't actually having a go at me. She was actually asking for help. And I just didn't have the maturity and the understanding to sit there and go, shit, like, I should be the sort of man of her life. I should be the person that she looks for strength and leadership. And I just exploded on her. And I just thought, like, and I just, honestly, I can't even explain, like, the feeling of guilt that I had. I burst into tears. I was basically absolutely bawling my eyes out. And that sort of happened to sort of cut it down. Others would be here forever, for 7 days. And I was bawling my eyes out. And, you know, and there's just memories coming back and this, that, and the other. And it did get to a point where I was, you know, extremely suicidal. To be brutally honest, I don't really like talking about this too much. I mean, only a few people know this. Now probably many is going to know it. But there was a point, and I did mention this in the RF medical, by the way. So, you know, but, you know, and that's why I said, you know, it literally saved my life. So, you know, there was a moment where I was going down this road. It was just getting worse and worse and worse, and I just didn't know what to do. And it got to like Thursday of that day, and, you know, I was sitting on the edge of my bed, and I kid you not, it was just getting worse every day. I was waking up in my sleep, like literally crying in my sleep, because I was just having these nightmares. But it just, I felt like it wasn't torture. It was like, did you ask for this? I'm now showing you the reality of what you are, like the sort of monster that you are. And I knew that I wasn't a good person. And I thought, okay, obviously this is not what I expected, but I still need to go along this road. And I just had this feeling, and it wasn't like a sort of thought I had in my head. It was like a feeling in the chest that this is going to end at some point. So I stuck it all the way out. And Thursday, I literally was sitting on the edge of my bed, and I'd done nothing all day long, because no matter what I did, every step I took, I felt worse. It was just the horriblest feeling in the world. I've never been through so much pain in my entire life. And I was going through it. And then basically that was the entire Thursday. And then something really weird happened on Friday. So standard day Friday, I woke up feeling shit and, you know, crap and all the rest of it. But then at some point towards like late morning to early sort of lunchtime, midday, I had this really like breath of fresh air, and I couldn't explain it any better. You know, it's not like I breathed in some cold or anything. It was just this uplifting feeling. You know, my lungs and all my body felt sort of really hitting the floor, and it just all lifted up. And it was almost like I could see clearly. Like if I look back, it was just black and white, and, you know, and all the memories stopped flowing in, all the feelings stopped flowing in, and I thought, whew. Like that was a rough ride, but I feel like it's over. And I thought, okay, you know, I've got low money in my bank account. Maybe I should start actually going out there and getting a job. And I kid you not, 15 minutes later after that, my dad walked in, who owns his own small company. He's a construction worker. And he came up to me, he was like, I could really do with some help next week. Like, do you fancy coming and working with me? And I thought, that's really weird. But I thought, hold on, I've asked to try and change. So maybe this is an opportunity. So I said, yes, bear in mind, I hated working with him, okay? And there was my own personal reason why, which I won't say in this video, but I thought maybe this is an opportunity for something, so I'll take it. And for the first time in quite a few months, actually, but obviously in that 7-day period, I actually enjoyed the weekend. You know, I didn't really do too much. I was just taking it very slow, because my mind was always racing at, you know, sort of 1,000,001 miles an hour. But I took it slow. I just started enjoying the little things. And I started noticing that I was enjoying smaller things than I did before. And I started appreciating things before, which was again very strange, but I didn't question it. I just went along with it. And I had a conversation with my mum, and she was like, maybe you should start getting out, like start going out with friends and stuff. And at this point, I was speaking to absolutely no one. I didn't speak to any friends I used to go out with when I was 18, or school friends, for basically 4 or 5 years. Maybe like 3 to 4 years, more than 5 years. So anyway, I thought, yeah, maybe, but, you know, I just want to go to work. I just want to sort of get back into the structure. I need a structure. That was most important. So I mean, Monday came around, and, you know, we started working, and construction's a fantastic job to relieve stress, as you can imagine. Very heavy lifting. You know, I've got quite a lot of upper body strength, so I could lift a lot. So I even pushed it a bit too much, maybe, because I had that sort of feeling in my head. But I was in quite a peaceful way, and I was actually enjoying working. You know, I always hated working before that, and now I'm starting to enjoy it and be a bit grateful for it. It's really, really odd. I never experienced this, but again, similar to before, I didn't question it. I just went along with it. So anyway, it sort of got to about Monday, Tuesday, and my mum kept mentioning, like, maybe you should go out, maybe you should go out. And I said to her, look, I would like to go out, but I just really don't know where to begin. You know, I don't talk to anyone. I didn't have that sort of, I wouldn't say moral, but I didn't have that sort of maybe spiritual strength, if you will, to sort of go out there and maybe like contact someone who I used to go out with, or start yeah, maybe like confidence actually more than anything else, to go out there and start, and I just really didn't know what to do. And I thought, okay, maybe that's the next step. Like, even though it's only been like 2 or 3 days since working, I felt like that's sorted, and I need to sort this out. Sort of get back out and just sort of, you know, get moving again, if you will. And I kid you not, Wednesday lunchtime, okay, I got a message from an old school friend who I haven't seen in about 3-4 years at this point, who I used to go out with when I was 18 and go clubbing and stuff, when I used to do that, not anymore. And just out of the blue, not even like, hey, how you doing? You know, I didn't keep in contact, literally just as small as like, hey, how you doing? Happy birthday. It's nothing, right, for 3-4 years. Out of the blue, didn't even say hello, just said, do you fancy coming out this weekend? And I just thought, that is seriously weird. And again, at this point, it didn't clock in my head what was going on. But again, I didn't question it. I just went along with it. So, and this is where it gets actually even weirder. So you think this whole story is weird, this gets even weirder. So anyway, Saturday comes around, I got paid weekly, so I had a decent bit of money, and I didn't want to go and blast it. And that was one thing I used to do, is just blast money all the time, and I was really sort of conservative about my money, and I only wanted to spend a couple of quid, not literally, but in a sane way, if you will. And because I weren't a big drinker anyway, so I just wanted to get a couple of drinks. I just wanted to get out and talk to people and just sort of catch up and sort of get back in the routine of things. So I went out and, I weren't planning on anything happening. So I basically turned up. It was sort of a Wetherspoons. And there was 2 of my old mates there who I used to go out with. And then these 2 girls who I've never met before. And I thought, no, I'm just here to chill, like nothing like that. Because I've always, I always sort of enjoyed female company and stuff. It's as you do. But I just generally thought, you know what, I just want to chill with the guys, just relax and have a good time. Because I've had a rough, really shit couple of months. And this was only the week prior. I was in an absolute hellhole, so let's not go there. So I was just talking to him, and I started talking to the other girls, just very casually, nothing more. Anyway, one of the girls was in a relationship with an old friend of mine, and then the other girl wasn't. And for some reason, this entire evening, they were like, "What do you think of this girl? Do you think she's attractive? She's single. What do you think?" I just thought, like, look, she is attractive. I find her physically attractive, but I was like, look, I'm not trying to do anything here. I've just suddenly got out of a really rough sort of period of my life, and I'm just here to enjoy myself. And then I had this moment where a thought just came into it. It's like, it's sort of almost like, well, what have you got to lose sort of feeling? And I didn't really know where that thought came from. So I thought, well, there's no pain in talking to someone. So I thought, you know what, I'm a bit scared to sort of do anything because I'm still in that sort of way, but no harm in talking to someone. So I spoke to this girl. We really got along. We had a sort of same sense of humour, and we was really just got along like a house on fire. And little did you know, almost 4 years later, we now have a child and we're engaged. So it's just crazy to think how it's sort of gone on. And that's the sort of really period where it started for me. That's the sort of early days. And as the years sort of rolled on from that, sort of in a steady pace. And there were small things that happened to me sort of along the way. I'll quickly talk about 2 of them. Basically, when I worked at the window sales before I sort of applied for the RAF, just sort of, I'll cut it down. If you're the last person there, because I was a salesman, you sort of lock up, turn all the lights off, make sure all the doors are shut because of the fire. And, there's many different systems of people contacting us via phone, via email, blah, blah, blah. And, someone rang just before, about maybe an hour before we closed, saying, look, I've got some windows that are blown, the sealed units are blown. I sort of wondered, do you do that? And I said, yes, what sort of window? And we sort of had a discussion for 5-10 minutes. And the guy left me his details. I agreed to go in his house to measure up the glass some point next week. So I think this was coming towards the end of the week, I believe. So anyway, I packed up, went downstairs, and I was basically turning the alarm system on, and the door just suddenly blasted open. And I was like, well, flipping out. And someone was like, I'm really sorry. I don't really know why I'm here, but I basically sent an email in to do some sealed units, and I don't know, did you receive it? Or not an email, sorry, I sent a phone call. I was like, yeah, I was the one who spoke to you, and okay, good. I said, look, I'll take down your details anyway, just in case it's someone else. So I took his details down, because I had a few more phone calls after that, but I was pretty confident that was the guy, but I couldn't really remember his details too much. So he gave me his details. I went back upstairs, because he got right in the logbook, basically, and none of the doors were closed. Okay, none of them. And if there was a fire, then the insurance wouldn't be covered the company. And I've never done that before. I've always made sure the doors are closed. And I just thought, and I know people might be asking, well, maybe you didn't remember. That's because my boss would tell me you've left all the doors open, so it never happened. So I just thought, well, that's really weird. Like, the guy sitting there went, I don't really know why I'm here. So again, that could just be coincidence. But there were so many little things like that, and I just thought, that's a weird coincidence, like that's weird. And it got to a point where I sort of said to myself, like, there's so much coincidence that there has to be something else at play here. I don't know what. And, you know, I started sort of looking at philosophers. You know, I'm a huge fan of Jordan Peterson, and I watched a lot of his biblical series, and I've always found religion interesting, but I was just skeptical of it. And I started thinking, like, yeah, well, I've gone through some weird stuff, you know, and I've always enjoyed psychology and things like that. So again, I was watching a lot of his videos, and I bought his books as well, 2 of his books, and that basically saved my life at one point as well. And I sort of took the principles of that, and when I really took them in, you know, sort of loves one of the rules. I don't know which one it is. If you've heard of Jordan Peterson before, of his 12 rules for life, you know, sort of love someone, love yourself as if you're someone you cared about. Like, that was a big one for me. And when I started doing that, it sort of naturally progressed on to them being religious. And before I actually touched on the actual day where I knew, okay, this is what I believe in now. You know, a lot of people say, oh yeah, I'm this religion, that religion, blah, blah, blah. It usually doesn't happen overnight, okay? This is something that takes a little bit of a progress. And for me, because I was skeptical, because obviously I'm upbringing and stuff, it took me a lot to get to it. But eventually got there, and I believe, you know, I will literally die by the sword on this now. There's no one that could change my mind on it, just because the amount of experiences I had. And I'll talk about one near the end of the video of something that actually happened just last week, which was really surreal. But anyway, so where it really hit me, like, it sort of began in 2021, but it really solidified in 2023. So I was watching a film called Sound of Freedom. Now, you guys may have heard this. It was very controversial. A lot of the cinemas in America tried to ban it. But, you know, I always wanted children, and this was about obviously sex trafficking of children, especially in America and South America. And I really didn't want to, you know, you go to cinemas to enjoy something. I knew I weren't going to enjoy it, but I felt like I needed to watch it. I watched a lot of reviews, and they're trying to take it off the screens. I thought, that's a bit weird. Usually if they're trying to do that, you know, I'm talking about the whatever you want to call them, I thought, you know, this is something that we should really see. And I watched this film, and, you know, I won't give too much of a damn, but my partner was bawling her eyes out the entire film, and it was really rough. You don't see anything too much, but it really sort of portrays it in a non-visual way, and it was extremely emotional, because this was based on a true story of this basically one CIA guy who was devout Christian or Catholic. I can't remember which one it was, and, you know, so was his wife, and, you know, he was part of I don't know if he was the FBI or whatever it was, and he was part of Border Force. And he went down there because the amount of trafficked children that go into America, and it was crazy numbers, and the stuff he saw, you know, and he rescued this boy, and he basically said, could you find my sister? And, you know, he said that it was eating him up alive, that he couldn't find this girl. And, you know, I watched a podcast with him, and which was just incredible to listen to his story. You know, I've always loved listening to people who have gone through some stuff. They've got some fantastic things to talk about, which helped my life, and I would encourage any of you guys to do it. You know, podcasts like Joe Rogan and things like that are just phenomenal, very interesting to watch, very informative. And, you know, anyway, he was talking about his actual life, the actual person this was based on. And, you know, he was talking about a point where he had this really good job, and he's coming up to, he had like literally about 6 months or something like that, maybe like 6 months to about 2 years, that sort of range, where he was going to have like millions of pounds of pension or dollars of pension. But he had this really moral dilemma where, you know, if he basically the CIA or whatever they were wouldn't fund this campaign to go and find this girl, which he did fund it initially, but it was only for 2 weeks, and he couldn't find her. He felt like he was getting closer and closer. So he had a conversation with his wife, and he decided to basically give it all up, give up his job, give up everything to go and find this young girl who has been sadly trafficked and going through, you know, God knows what she's going through, and to basically give up everything to go and rescue this one girl. And I don't want to spoil, you know, if you don't want to hear this, maybe skip this part. But at the end of the film, he rescues her. But it's what he goes through to get. Like, his life was basically on the line at one point, just to save this girl he's never met before. And it was just such an act of courage. And he said in the podcast, and again, this is where I started to believe, is that he genuinely believed if he didn't have faith and belief, he would not have rescued that girl. He would have just stayed at home comfortable in his house. Because he said at one point he'd rather do that, because, you know, going away and rescuing the girl was all cobwebs, as he described it, you know, the dark place, because he would have lost his job. He's got a family to, you know, he had about 5 or 6 kids. He had a wife he had to look after, his stuff like this financially. And if he'd done this, he's risking. And fortunately for him, his wife is even more religious than he was. And she convinced him that, you know, if at the end of the road, when you meet your maker, he's going to ask the question, why didn't you go and save that girl? And what answer are you going to give? And he says, I can't give one. So then when he started running that sort of psychological, I wouldn't say trick, if you will, but a sort of different perspective, he saw that actually going and rescue a girl was the light way, is the best way to do it, and staying at job is the cobwebs, if you see what I mean. So his perspectives changed, and he always thanked his wife for it. And then to this day, he saved thousands of kids. I think it's called the Railroad Society or something like that. I don't really know what his charity is called. And he basically goes into America and he rescues all these children. And I genuinely thought, like, that is a man of belief. Like, that is a real, true believer. And he inspired me. And I thought at this point, you know, I had a lot of things happen. I was believing, I just didn't know where to go. And that's when I decided to become Christian. And, you know, and as those years, and as sort of a year and a bit's gone on, it's just got even stronger. So, you know, it's just that I recommend you guys go and watch that film. It's a really heartbreaking film, but it's absolutely phenomenal. It's a really good film to watch. And it just shines a light of what actually happens in the world. And I feel like a lot of people don't want to look at that because then it becomes real. But the problem is it is real. Like, this is happening. And I really wanted to expose myself to that because I wanted to make myself educated to it. And, you know, me and my partner, because we always wanted to have children. So it gave us a new insight on how to protect our child as well. So it's an absolute phenomenal film, and that's where it really started for me. And since then, you know, I bought a Bible. I'm still not perfect to this day, believe me. You know, I do swear. You know, I know some people say, oh, you can't swear because you're Christian, but, you know, in my eyes, it's like in my heart is more important for me. You know, I'll try and close this video down and hopefully within about 4 minutes or so, because I know it's getting a bit on now. But sort of to close this off, you know, I've heard so many people say, oh, you know, you should go and get baptized, you should go to church, you should go to this, which, unfortunately, there was a church on base, but they don't do Sunday service, unfortunately. But at Horton, I was going to church every Sunday. I really enjoyed it. I really felt a sense of presence in there. And then, well, actually, before I continue on that, to sort of conclude that sort of big block of the video, I sort of realised, I was like, oh my, like, my entire life, there has been someone watching over me. You know, it's been God this whole time. And when I did that, I started to, it really just opened my eyes to it. I was like, how could I not see it? You know, I was so skeptical, and he was still leading me. And, you know, there was times when I was really young where basically I could have got beaten up really bad. I was basically walking my dog at night. I won't go into this too much, and I don't know what else would have happened. And there was this big group of like old teenagers, and I was on rollerblades because I've always been a huge skater. And I was in this dark neck of the woods, not literally, but there was like a path that I could skate on, obviously mud and stuff. And I felt like I should go back. I should go back the other way. And something, I didn't know that there was this group of kids there. So I turned around and I heard them. I looked around and they were like, oh, let's get that boy on the skates. Let's go and get him. And they started running. So I started obviously skating. Obviously, I'll be faster if someone skates. And the dog was freaking going for it. She thought she was having a laugh. And I was about 13 at the time. So again, it's just things like that. And then more recently, I'll touch on this quickly. You know, I was laying in bed and I just couldn't sleep. It was actually last Sunday. And I just couldn't sleep. You know, there was just, I've always had like noise in my head, like songs or I keep replaying on repeat. It's just flipping irritating. And it's just like, just my mind wouldn't settle. And it got to about 3 o'clock in the morning. Bearing in mind, I went to bed at 10. Okay, so you could really put that together. 5 hours I was in bed for. And I just couldn't get this sound out of my head. And it wasn't like nothing playing. I put music on. I started changing clothes. I was doing everything I can to try and stop this noise in my flipping head. And then in the end, bearing in mind for the past couple of days, or even week though, I haven't been praying. I haven't really been reading the Bible. I sort of fell off the ship, so to speak. And I just sat there laying down on the back. And I just sort of, when I pray, I always sort of count it as like channel. It's like a tether between me and God. And when I always sort of pray, it's almost more like a conversation more than, you know, I sort of give myself to him. But it's also a conversation between me and him. And I literally created a tether, and it was almost weird. I can't really explain it, but there was like loads of cloud in my head. And when I done it, it was almost like a beam of light shot. And it's sort of, I could feel like these sort of clouds going in. This could be me just going crazy at 3 o'clock in the morning. It's potential, right? So anyway, shot in it. I just said, like, usually I would say something along like, you know, strength for me to keep going forwards, keep being in your light. Don't let me be in your shadow anymore. Just things like that. Never asking for anything. You know, always asking to continue it on, to carry his light forwards and things like that. You know, so I can keep spreading people, you know, keep spreading sort of the word around and trying to help people who need it. And then I went, I don't know what I need to do, but can you please stop this noise? I can't focus, I can't even speak this prayer in my head. Like, I just stopped the noise, and I kid you not, within 5 seconds, everything went silent. Everything went silent. I was sitting there, I could hear ringing in my ears because how silent it was. I always find when my mind's not going, I have ringing ears, it's weird. Not like really, really ringing, just like a slight ring. And I was just like, whoa, okay. Like, bearing in mind, I put, you know, calming music on. binaural music, everything. I was trying to get cold to maybe focus on being cold, tried to get hot, focus on being hot, tried to be normal and calm. I tried everything. And it just silent, absolutely everything went silent. And I just thought, what the flip is that? And then I realized, I was like, wow, this is obviously a lesson to me that I need to get back on track. I cut a long story short. I know I said I'll finish this in 3 minutes, but never the case. I am concluding it now. I then started to read the Bible again. I started praying every single night. Ever since then, I've been sleeping peacefully, because usually I'm quite a rough sleeper as well. And I find myself dozing off to sleep easier, and I'm way more calmer. Okay, again, I do fall off ship. I do make mistakes, because I am human, and I am still learning, because obviously this is all new to me. But that's just it's just a crazy thing to experience. And that's when I really thought I need to make a video on this. I feel like it's time to make a video on it, because I've been wanting to make a video for quite a while, but I really didn't know how to sort of attack it, if you will. That's probably not the right word to use, but I'm going to use it, attack it. But yeah, that's going to be the end of the video. I hope you guys have found it informative and interesting. At the bottom, again, I just wanted to state, this is not trying to convert anyone or trying to put anyone down by any means. This is just me talking about my own experiences and things like that. As you could imagine, this is a huge area of conversation. To fit in a 30-minute video is almost impossible. So I really just tried to talk about my experiences and sort of things like that. So if you have a bit stuck, a bit confused, please drop them in the comments. I will answer it as best as I can. But other than that, guys, I hope you find it interesting, and I'll see you in the next video, which will be maybe in the next couple of weeks or so. But until then, take care. Bye bye.